This video is sponsored by Ren. Welcome back, everybody. I actually just got done editing this and I wanted to put one extra thing up front. This is a video about electric vehicles, and it's going to be in two parts. One is this video discussing the soft aspects of electric vehicles. The next one is going to be a really focused economic discussion on electric vehicles. The reason I wanted to do a separate electric vehicle video is because the previous videos on solar and battery tech really focused on the solar side and power production side of things, and I wanted to get another video out about the actual EV side of things. I'm putting this up front because in the video I didn't discuss enough about what the goal of this video is. This goal isn't to convince everybody to buy an EV, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that economically they're very difficult to get into, even though it's more economical now than ever with both the incentives and the reduction in some of these EV prices. It's easier to get into an EV now than ever, but a lot of people just aren't in that financial situation. And if that's you, please take this video as a societal approach and things that people can talk about regarding if they want to get into an EV or not. It's not me trying to convince somebody who is struggling day to day to even just put food on the table that they need to go buy an EV or they're not green. Okay, so I just want to get that up front and make sure that that's fully understood. There's a lot of people who are in the market to try to buy an EV, and I think sharing my experience both from a permaculture and engineering standpoint, and then also an EV owner for 5 years plus now, has a lot of value. So that's the whole purpose of this video. So without further ado, let's get into the video, and I hope you guys really enjoy this one. Everyone, welcome back to the food forest. I mean, kind of, we're inside. It's winter time. Vehicles are a thing that I buy to get from A to B. I am not a buy a sports car for status type of person. I'm more of a garden in my PJ pants and put it out on YouTube for the rest of the world to see kind of person. I don't give a crap about what anyone thinks about me. Okay, so let's get into it. I want to tell you about our past vehicles. We always buy fuel efficient cars, as I said, but we did need to buy a truck because I basically need to haul a trailer to get wood chips and all this sort of stuff. So we used to be a two-car family. Since we moved up here and we started planting food forests and wood chips and manure and having to get all that stuff, I invested in a truck and a trailer to pull it, and those things have paid for themselves with the amount of free wood chips and free manure that I've pulled out and brought to my land, free with leaf bags, like 1,500 a year. But we're in the state where we basically have to have a truck. So our other car has always been an economic car. The one prior to the Tesla was a Elantra, I think 2014, Hyundai Elantra. And we got that because it was cheap, because I'm cheap, and also because it's really good on fuel economy. And the reason that's really important is that, this isn't my job. My job is an engineer at the nuclear station, and that's 40 minutes away. It's really started to weigh heavily on me that my lifestyle is actually quite carbon heavy. And because of that, we got solar panels on the roof and a Tesla. So we wanted to, I really wanted to reduce our carbon footprint so I could live more in line with my ethics, because end of the day, I got 3 kids. I've got a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 17-year-old boy. And we bought the Tesla in 2018, so that would have been 5 years ago. They would have been like 8, 10, and 12. So, I've got 3 kids. I'm one person out of 5 in a family. I'd love to, be extreme minimalist, sell this house, live in, a little yurt somewhere in the hills, quit my job, live very minimally. Honestly, that would be probably what would make me the happiest. But I have to understand that my choices impact everyone in the family. And I can be really hard to live with, for sure. And one of the reasons why we got the EV is because, I really was pushing that there's this disjointment in what I ethically believe in and the way that my life is forced on me. And that is that I have a job and that I have to travel for my work, and I can't just uproot my family. And that I've got 3 kids and they want to play hockey, and they want to play competitive hockey. And I don't know if you guys know, hockey in Canada, playing rep hockey, which is representative hockey. You represent your town, you play against other towns. Canada's cities are really far apart, so our loop for hockey, we're traveling, 150 kilometers in either way to get to our games. And each team will have roughly 5 hockeys a week, you know, and with half of those being away, you're traveling a ton, and then 3 kids. My schedule in the wintertime, like when I say that I can't do consulting and all that kind of stuff because I'm busy, my schedule in the wintertime is literally wake up, scramble to get the kids to school, drive to work, come home from work, scramble home, pick everyone up. My wife and I go sometimes 2 separate ways to 2 different hockeys, come back at 10 o'clock at night, you know, try to empty the dishwasher, get kids' lunches done, maybe do a load of laundry, and then repeat. And I'm answering questions at the hockey rink, and I'm doing all of this YouTube stuff. Usually at the hockey rink, I'm thinking while I'm driving to hockey. I'm trying to maximize efficiencies and overlap in these ways. It's the only way I can have a YouTube channel. But I'm that busy, and it's because of hockey. Hockey is a tremendous transportation footprint. And as a family, the 5 of us, we travel roughly 70,000 kilometers per year. That's what we put on our cars. A lot of the hockey before we got the Tesla was done in the truck. So we're driving all of these kilometers in a truck that's getting 13.4 liters for every 100 kilometers. And I'll do the mile per gallon conversion there. It's a gas hog. And we would take the Elantra as much as possible, but it was, you know, it was like 7.7 or so liters per 100 kilometers. So it's double as good as the truck, a little less than double as good as the truck, but it's still a ton. For example, the Tesla is like around like 2.1 gas equivalent, so it's even that much better. Okay, so the disjoint between, you know, where I want to be ethically in my life and minimalization and really watching my carbon footprint and being a conscious consumer, and then that slamming into the reality of having to live in the systems that we have, and me being just 1 out of 5, and I can't just quit my job because I've got kids I got to put through university, that kind of thing. You know, the carbon footprint that we have as a family that both commute to work and have 3 kids in hockey is gigantic. So we wanted to get the EV to help offset that, but it's not enough. So a company like Ren will allow me, this is one of the reasons why I support Ren, it allows me to then go further and help offset my carbon footprint in other ways. And this is basically what Ren does. Ren is a company that funds projects that sequesters carbon. So what you can do is go online to ren.co and take a carbon questionnaire, and they'll try to ask you questions about your lifestyle and figure out what your carbon footprint is. In Canada, the average is 36. Now, my carbon footprint, it's embarrassing to me. It's 36 tons of CO2 per year. And it doesn't include things like all the trees that I plant. To me, ethically, I feel like I want to do more to actually reduce that. So through my personal individual membership with Ren, I can actually fund carbon projects. So what I personally do is I set up a monthly funding to Ren, and then Ren funds climate projects. And the really good thing about Ren is that all of their financials are available on their website, and they're fully transparent. They actually have a really, really strong Trustpilot review as well. So these are the actual people that are using Ren, like myself, who really enjoy what Ren is doing, who, you know, give me the peace of mind that I can align my ethics and my lifestyle, and then, you know, fund projects. And the best part about it is that I'm funding projects that aren't me. I'm funding projects that aren't even local to Canada. I can fund reforestation projects in, you know, desolated communities that have actually been impacted by climate change or by deforestation. I can fund ecosystem preservation projects, which to me is even more important than planting trees, is stopping any more from being cut. So I can fund organizations that go and try to protect areas of the rainforest. And there's a whole bunch of different projects that Ren does that you should go check out and find out which ones you want to support, because the really cool thing about Ren is you can actually change where your funding goes. Right now, I've adjusted my Ren portfolio to be entirely on conservation projects, because I really do think that conservation is the most important thing. And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about my collapse video, and how the carrying capacity curve is probably more important than the other one. And I know a lot of people are in the same boat as me. We work and, you know, we're doing things because it makes sense for people that we love. And it's nice that there's a company out there that I can trust, first off, and second off, that will then fund the projects and make the change in the world that I demand with my money. So that's why I personally support REN. If you want to support REN, in the video description below, I'll pin a comment as well in this video. Check that out, go to the link, take your carbon calculator footprint, and even if you don't want to support REN, do that anyways, just to get that info, just to figure out what your impact is. But then if you do want to go further and support REN like I do, then consider joining up.
Okay, post-editing, I want to slip this in. This is really exciting. I was actually able to get in contact with the REN sponsors and negotiate an even better offer. So for everyone who signs up with this link down below, you're actually going to get your first whole entire month for free. So now there's basically no risk to sign up. You can go and take your carbon footprint calculator and start funding carbon projects. And then after a month, if you still really like what REN is doing, then you can continue supporting them like I do. So this is a great way to make an impact on the planet, and I'm really excited that I could bring this to you guys in this improved offer. So definitely check them out and try it out.
Okay, so let's get back to the electric vehicles. So in the economic side, I'll get into all that. I won't get too much into all this, but basically for every kilometer that I'm displacing of the truck by driving the Tesla instead, we're basically getting a 13.2 times return on that. And I'll go into all the economics of what that means for how much gas we're saving, how much money we're saving, the cost of the Tesla, the current value, so the devaluation and depreciation of the Tesla, and what the final economics of it are, what the return on investment, how long it takes you to recoup the cost of the initial investment. And, you know, just economically, the case is there. You know, the EVs, if you drive a lot, the case is there. And we'll get into that in the next video. But this is why we're doing this series of videos, is because it's very favorable to actually drive the Tesla. And I'm ignoring stuff like the fact that I'm getting free power out of my roof, because it's not really free power, right? I had to buy solar panels, and that money that I saved by getting free charging out of the Tesla is the ROI for the solar panels, but I can't double count that, or else I'm double counting. Okay, so for getting back to the EVs, you know, the carbon footprint that I have, because I have to work, you know, we have chosen to move out to the country a little bit further, because basically we could trade our old house. We used to live in a town called Oshawa in Bowmanville before that, and I would travel to work, and it would take me 35 minutes to work to get from a much shorter distance. And it was because I'm traveling south down towards the power plant, and there's no big highway north-south, you know, where I was. So I'm leaving in the morning, because that's when you go to work, and that's also when kids go to work. And you're stopping at like every single stop sign, you know, and you're spending all that energy to get your car up to speed, and then you're braking and you're throwing it all in the garbage. And then you're doing that like every block. And with all the amount of school buses that you're stopping behind, and stop signs and street lights, it would take me 35 minutes to get to work. And now moving out further out east, it still takes me about 40 minutes to get to work. It's about the same, but actually I track everything, and my gas prices are actually roughly the same. So even though I'm traveling much farther, 5 times roughly farther in terms of kilometers, my gas is the same, because I'm not stop, start. And like, you know, the worst kinds, not just normal city traffic, but like school start, city traffic. It was really bad on my gas prices. So there's a huge economic value for me to actually look into an investment where I can actually save money for every kilometer that we drive when I'm driving lots of kilometers, because I'm forced into that, because that's just the way that life is when you're a Canadian and you got to go to work and you've got kids, and the kids want to do activities, right? This is kind of half the problem with the climate change. When I'm talking about the climate change series, that you get extremists like me, like I'm so extreme, I'm really difficult to live with. Like, let me tell you, like I'm so extreme on, you know, like I refuse to support, you know, certain large companies that do global shipping, for example. I want to always buy locally. I want to always upcycle things. I want to spend every dollar that we spend on trees, like, because I'm like totally obsessed. So, and you know, like I coppice my sumacs to sequester carbon by making biochar out of it. I plant thousands of trees every year in my free time. Probably tens of thousands if you consider seed balls that I make and just throw out, you know, the side of the highway into the wild. And it's really satisfying hobbies that sequester a lot of carbon. But I had this section of my life that was always really annoying me, that I'm spending so much carbon on transportation, like 70,000 kilometers a year for our family, just driving around everywhere. And then, you know, my wife also drives for work. And if you drive for work and you get, you know, like a kilometer-based repayment for the fact that you're using your own personal vehicle for a work function, there's even more of an economic driver to buy something that's fuel efficient. And for the Tesla, that, you know, is extremely fuel efficient, because now that kilometer, you know, per diem that you're getting is actually almost like a side income. It's like a pay raise. Okay, so super long ramble intro. This is why we basically wanted to buy a Tesla. We used to have a Hyundai Elantra, and we wanted to basically displace the kilometers that we would spend on the Elantra with a Tesla. And then also, every kilometer that I can displace out of the truck is a bonus. I need a truck because I need to have something that'll pull a trailer. So unfortunately, you know, unless I go 3 vehicles, which I don't want to do, I have to have a truck, which means one of us has to take the truck to work. The other thing is, this video was kind of delayed because I wanted to get the financials going, but then COVID happened. So in 2020 and 2021, my work basically completely locked down, and we were able to work from home full time. So all the numbers for why you would buy a Tesla or an EV got really messed up, because obviously just buying a Tesla, have it sit in your driveway, is not the fastest way to recoup your investment. You know, the fastest way is if you're driving a lot, because then you're displacing those kilometers from an ICE car into the EV. So for us, actually, I really wanted to wait for 2022, which was full back to work, to get a realistic picture of, you know, what you would save every year compared to my old numbers. And like I said, I track everything. So every single day, and this is a good idea for anyone. I think everyone should do this. Every single day I log into my online banking and I just write down the numbers of all my accounts. And then I put that in a spreadsheet, and then I basically have all that info. And then I can go back and do, you know, graphing and calculus to find slopes and areas under curves in order to estimate savings rates and all these kind of things. So I do that. So I actually have data back to like 2008 on all of our financials. You know, everything that we spend, I have in a spreadsheet. So I have history on how much gas we spend, like to the penny, how much gas we spend. So I can actually get really accurate numbers of the real values, which will be again in the next video. Okay, so let's talk more now about the specifics of the EV. Now, my previous video on misinformation and renewables talked about, again, batteries for EVs. Like it was really focused on solar and batteries, and we didn't really talk about the EVs. Today I want to actually talk about that piece, the actual electric vehicle. Now, I did a ton of research on which EV to buy. Teslas at the time, that we're talking 2018, were fairly expensive. We bought ours for 57,000 Canadian. And I think now you can get it for 54,000, and I think you get $5,000 rebate from the federal government in Canada. And then I think in the United States you get like, I think a $7,500 rebate, which brings the cost down to I think around 35,000 for the base model. So Teslas, especially Model 3s over the last decade, EV prices have just fallen so far that they're now actually just like a fairly affordable car. I know it's a big leap to get into them, but it's not like the old days where you'd buy a Model S for like $130,000. You can get into this market fairly cheap. For us, like buying for 57,000 back in 2018, that was where we thought, okay, this is cheap enough. We'll save, I estimated around 8,000 a year, and I was really close, like 7,000 is what the actuals are per year for driving this thing. And then I thought, the thing's going to pay for itself, and then I'm going to have an asset that's actually worth something that I can possibly sell. And the important thing about this is that then there's actually so few moving parts on a Tesla. And this is the thing, this is about EVs in general. I don't want to just say Tesla. All EVs are going to be like this. There's so few moving parts in an electric motor, an electric engine, that as an engineer, that's mucho bueno for an engineer. Everything that moves has friction, and every place you have friction, you have waste heat and you have mechanical damage. And then now you have to have systems to remove that mechanical damage, like say oil filters or lubricants. And so now you're having more pumps and belts that get driven off of a drive shaft, and you've got more brake concern in an ICE vehicle, because the Tesla magnetic engine, as soon as you basically take the accelerator off, you start magnetic braking. So you actually start, your car actually turns into an electric generator, and then you're actually powering a battery, much like if you just ran solar panels powering a battery. That's what your car is. When it has velocity and you take your foot off the pedal, you actually have now a generator, and the wheels are actually going to charge your battery back up. If you drive your Tesla or EV properly, then you'll actually never need to brake. So our brakes are still our original brakes. And this is in Canada, where we've got ice and salt on the road concerns, corrosion, that kind of thing. We actually had our brakes inspected, and they're basically brand new. The brakes are basically brand new. You don't have things like a transmission and gearbox. You don't have a lot of mechanical parts that an ICE vehicle would have, which means you don't have those maintenance costs. You don't have, these really big replacement costs. You don't have an engine that is basically pistons moving around with gaskets that are heating up, and you can blow a piston. You don't have like timing belts and all this kind of thing, right? It's all done through electronics and basically a stator and a rotor that rotate, and they don't even touch each other. It's just this magnetic field that pulls it around. And you can kind of think of it like a merry-go-round. And instead of pulling someone around the merry-go-round, it's a magnet that's pulling and constantly moving and pulling the person around. And then you basically, that's how an electric engine basically works. It's a magnet that pulls that, handle on the merry-go-round that the kid would be hanging onto, and it pulls it around, and the magnetic field rotates. So, I mean, that's how a magnetic engine works. And because of that, there's almost no losses. There's no frictional losses. You got like a little bit of air turbulence losses. And then if the electronics, and this is an important part, and this is why one of the reasons I think Tesla has the best vehicles out there to buy, and this is not sponsored by Tesla, this is just my opinion, is that one of the losses you do have are I2R losses through the actual electronics. This is current and resistive losses through the wiring. And then you've also got this flux, eddy currents will basically get created in the actual magnetic core of the magnets. It's actually really important that you have electronics that can minimize those losses. And these are some of the areas where Tesla just beats other competition, and they're miles ahead. So their motors are more efficient and much less losses. And because of that, the electricity that you're taking off your solar panels, or that you're paying, for us, 10 cents a kilowatt hour for in Ontario, more of that's actually going into the battery because the batteries are better, and more of that's going to the actual engine, and then more of it's getting transmitted down to the wheels to actually move your car. So Teslas are very, very efficient in terms of their energy, which is the way that they pay themselves off. But that's not even the reason why I would personally buy a Tesla. I think the biggest reason I would buy a Tesla over any other EV is the charging infrastructure. And this is, like, if you're a family like us where you go on road trips because you've got hockey tournaments, and you're traveling far distances because you just live in Canada, and it's a larger distance between cities, having a really good charging infrastructure is so important. And the reason why is that when we're going on a long road trip, if we have a hockey tournament in our Tesla, and we have to drive for roughly about 2 hours, and then we have to stop and charge for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we keep doing that. And you actually want to stay low on your battery when you're on your road trip, because it charges faster at the charging station, and there are also tiered rates for the superchargers, so you want to be charging at the low end as much as possible. So you don't want to be spending 45 minutes stopping every 2 hours. That is just annoying, and that's what most of the other cars and EVs are like. Like if you have a Nissan Leaf, I have a friend who's got a Nissan Leaf, and they took it for a road trip. And basically every 2 hours they had to stop for like 45 minutes to charge. That's just really annoying. For the Tesla, the superchargers just charge so fast, and the battery tech is just so much better that to me, it's just, that is the reason why I would recommend a Tesla to almost everyone in Canada. If you're not going on really long road trips, then you could consider getting a more economical car that's cheaper to actually get into. But again, like the Tesla now is like 35,000 US to get into it after rebates, something like that. So to me, the economics are just so in favor of both getting an EV, but also specifically getting a Tesla. Now, I don't really like Elon Musk. I've probably made that fairly clear a bunch of times. I despise Rupert Murdoch, for example. And he's hanging out with Rupert Murdoch. That tells you all the things you need to know about Musk. But you have to understand that, like, when I bought this, I bought it in 2018, and Musk hadn't really jumped the shark and turned into the wacko that he is now. But regardless of what you actually think about the person, I mean, some people think he's Tony Stark, right? And I think the projects that he wants to create, getting humanity to Mars and stuff, those are all fantastic. And even the conceptual idea behind buying Twitter to have a free and open source media and stuff, I mean, that's fantastic. But I mean, you've got a guy who posts tweets like this. I mean, he's just. Yeah, so we're gonna edit a lot of that little rant out. More reasons why you should consider, or more things to consider now for like a Canadian environment, is that it gets really cold here. So when you're charging a battery, the charging efficiency actually drops with temperature, and as well the carrying capacity, like the capacity of the battery drops as well. So a lot of people know this, but often the specs that they will give out will not be representative of what reality is. And I'll tell you what reality is. We have a 53 kilowatt hour standard range plus Model 3. So that's the size of our battery. When we charge it to 100%, we get, in terms of what the icon in the car says, roughly 345 kilometers. We usually charge it between 80 and 90, depending on what my wife needs for work that day, or what location we're driving for a hockey tournament. And that'll give us around, I don't know, 310 or so kilometers. And what you find is, as you're driving, you might drive 10 kilometers, but the battery will have gone down 12. In the wintertime, it'll actually be roughly double. So in the wintertime, when it gets really cold, and this falls off like a cliff. So if you're at near freezing, then it won't be so bad as this. And then if you get to like minus 10 Celsius, minus 20 Celsius, minus 40 Celsius, it doesn't decrease linearly. It falls off like a cliff really quickly. When we're down at like minus 40, when we get really, really cold days here, minus 30, minus 40, whatever the stated kilometers are on the battery, so like a full charge battery at 308, and we warm the car up before we leave, and we top it up while it's warm so that it's got as much juice in that battery as possible. When we do all these things, we won't get 308 out of that. We'll get 150. It'll get cut in half. And this is really important if you're in a really cold climate. You need to know that if you're going to buy an EV, whatever range you need, consider what it's going to be like in the coldest day of the winter, and then buy for that. So for us, the Tesla standard range plus range is just, on some cold days, it's not enough for my wife. So she'll actually go into work, she'll be driving around, and she'll be like, I don't think I can get home if I don't swap. So we'll swap. And it's because we don't ever want to supercharge, because when you supercharge, you're paying close to like ICE car, internal combustion engine, ICE car gasoline prices is kind of, is roughly like what you're paying. At the low end, it's a little better. It's probably half as much as that. But when you full charge a battery off of a supercharger, for example, you're going to pay roughly the equivalent that it would be for a tank of gas in terms of dollars spent for every kilometer of driving that you get. So when my wife can't quite make it home, she'll drop the car off and we'll swap at work. She'll take my truck and then drive that around, and then I'll drive the Tesla home so that we don't have to supercharge it all and we can get the solar panels charging the Tesla. So just understand that if you are in a more rural area that gets cold weather, I would say at minus 40 Fahrenheit Celsius, that's where they match. At minus 40, you can cut your battery in half, whatever your range is, it'll be half of that. And then, I don't know, maybe minus 20 Celsius, you'll get maybe, I don't know, 70% of your battery. At minus 10 Celsius, you'll get 80%. So, you know, if you've got 100 kilometers left, you'll only be able to go 80. It'll go from 100 to 0, but you'll only have driven 80. So just make sure that you're aware of that and then size up the battery. Right now, for extending the battery on a Model 3, I believe it's roughly $16,000 Canadian. You can check the US is probably around 14,000 or so US. So it's a significant increase, and then that's a significant increase in weight as well, which then also can take away some of the economics for the fuel efficiency when you're driving. That starts to go down as well. So you want to really get the smallest battery that you need, but you want to make sure that you get a big enough battery. So in terms of the economics, anyone who's stayed this long in the video, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek as a little cherry, a little reward. Thanks for staying and watching this. And definitely comment below. Let's have a little conversation. Ask me any questions that you want, and we'll just have a back and forth conversation on this. And I can help you out with any, experiences that I've had driving my electric vehicle. But I'll give you a little sneak peek to the economics behind it. Basically $57,000 purchase price, and our average year, ignoring the COVID years where it just sat in our driveway, our average year we saved $7,100 per year. And then, that alone is an 8-year, you have a free car. Yeah, so the economics are just fantastic for us. And I think if you drive any realistic amount, then they'll probably be fantastic for you. Our energy prices right now are like 10 cents. Because we have the solar panels in Ontario, you get taken off of a time of use where, depending on what time of day you consume your energy, it'll be a different rate. And we get swapped into like another blended rate where it's basically, if you spend a certain amount of energy, then you pay a certain rate, and then once you go above that, you pay more. Because we've got an electric vehicle, then, and because we don't have batteries, we direct feed from the solar back into the grid, we get a credit for that, and then we basically charge from the grid to the Tesla. And it's because I didn't want to spend $35,000 on batteries when I wanted the solar, because we wouldn't have done it if I would have gone that way. It was hard enough to convince my wife to spend $35,000, $30,000 on solar panels. So it was either that or nothing. So we went with this. So basically our solar feeds into the grid, we get rebates from that off of our energy bill, and then we charge the Tesla from the grid. So I mean, it's kind of like the solar panels are charging the Tesla. But because of the fact that we swapped from time of use into this other tiered system, because of that, and because we drive a lot of kilometers with the Tesla, 52,000 kilometers a year, by the way, that's a lot of kilometers. Because we drive that much with the Tesla, and because we then fill the battery up at home, we go over that cap. So we actually pay the more expensive rate, which is I think 10.7 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's our average cost of pumping money into the Tesla. And even at that cost, so if your energy is cheaper, then you'll do much better than we do here. But even with that cost, we save $7,000 a year on gas. And like, I would have spent in 2022, if I didn't have the Tesla, I would have spent $19,000 in gas on my Chevy Silverado truck, just driving to work and through hockey and stuff like that. So we actually saved a lot of money in 2022 just because gas prices spiked. This is another thing I track, is I track all the gas prices so that I can compare what my actuals were to, the bill that I see actually at the gas station. So we saved $7,000 a year for the Tesla, and at $57,000 of our initial cost in 2018, even though it's cheaper now, we would have basically paid the car off in 8 years, and then we would have an asset. And the asset is basically, you know, an electric vehicle with like 8 moving parts on it, and 4 of them are the wheels, and you know, a degraded battery. So then now, in order to basically get a brand new vehicle, and basically brand new brakes, because, you know, they'd be pretty much brand new after 8 years still. So in order to get a brand new Tesla, you replace that battery pack, and everything else is great. Like, everything else is fantastic, and like, it's been a very reliable car. I know a lot of people have these, you know, horror stories about things that are going wrong in Tesla Model 3s. It's been the best, most reliable car I've ever had. And so then I spend, I don't know, $12,000 to get a new battery. So now my next 8 years is not a $57,000 entry. It's a $12,000 entry. So then now I pay it off in a year and a half, and then I'm making $7,000 every single year in save gas prices compared to if I would have, you know, been driving a car or a truck. The economics are like, it's there, and the tipping point is here. And I think the biggest problem with the Tesla is the mining of the battery and the lithium and the cobalt. Definitely check out my renewables video, because I discuss all these things. The cobalt is being phased out of the new lithium iron phosphate batteries and the new manganese batteries, but even if you account for the cobalt mining in the Congo and the, you know, humanitarian crisis and problems that creates, if you're otherwise having a gasoline vehicle, then you have other environmental impacts, like from coal, oil, and gas. You have oil spills, and you've got environmental disasters, and you've got the energy associated with the actual you know, production of that gas and oil. You know, to me, I actually think that I would rather get the infrastructure going for how we're actually going to transition off of coal and gas, because they're non-renewables, because we have to go there anyways. You know, we're going there anyway, so let's get there, because, you know, every single year we've got 2.5 to 3 ppm of carbon that's increasing. And a lot of people will say, I'm going to go on a rant now about carbon, aren't I? A lot of people will say that carbon's not really an issue, because you get more carbon, you get more plants, and more plants sequester more carbon. It's false. I mean, it's true, and this is the problem with all of these things. They're all true, but they're also wrong, because it's true that in the past that happens, and that will happen, but there's other things that are going on in the plant where you've got nutrient deficiencies that get created when you have really high CO2 ppm environments, but also you need water, and we've broken our water cycles. So if we're having droughts, then the plants can't actually sequester that carbon. And more importantly, there's actually, you know, it's demonstrably true that the very fact that ppm is continuing to go up means that it's by definition overwhelming the trees and grasses and plants' ability to sequester it. You know, like, that's just obvious. If it's going up still, it's not working. The systems are broken. The fact that it's not only going up, but the rate that it's going up is increasing. And then you also hear some people say that water is a worse greenhouse gas than CO2. And I mean, that's factually true also. But it also doesn't matter, because if we're at equilibrium right now, and the only goal is to stop warming, then it doesn't matter if CO2 is like a tiny fraction of the percentage. If we can't pull the water out of the air, which, by the way, is only resident in the atmosphere for a couple of days before it comes back down as rain. CO2 will last for like 100 years. But if we can't pull that water out, then adding more CO2 is just tipping us further towards, you know, collapse. And it doesn't matter that water's worse, because that's already there. It's already in the air. What matters is that we don't get worse from where we are right now. Like a similarly ridiculous argument could be made about methane, and why methane doesn't matter, because it's even smaller percentage of the of the greenhouse gases in the air. But methane's useless in the air. It actually provides no function at all. So we don't need it in the air. So the fact that it's a small percentage doesn't matter. While methane's in the air, it's 100 times worse than CO2, but then it turns into CO2. So and then it lasts for 100 years. So over the lifetime, it's 25 times to 30 times worse than CO2. Methane's like the thing that we should solve immediately, like right away. It's our fastest solution to global warming. And the fact that it's a small percentage in the air and the fact that water might be worse than it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because what matters is where we are, equilibrium, and where we're going. We need to change it, because if we keep melting ice caps, for example, a whole bunch of stuff starts triggering. And, we're actively melting ice caps. We're melting permafrost, permanent frost, where it shouldn't be melting ever, and it's melting. And, 99.5% of the ice on the planet is in glacial sheets and glaciers and ice sheets. A lot of it's in Antarctica, mostly in the Antarctic Peninsula, and then that's what's melting really fast right now in Antarctica. But then Greenland is melting really, really quickly. When the ice melts, it causes a whole bunch of problems, because not only is now something that was white turning into something that's blue, that changes the Earth's albedo, which means the Earth is going to absorb more heat. Similar to, you get really hot if you have a black t-shirt on in the summer. It's the same idea versus someone in a white t-shirt, right? When you melt the ice and you turn it from white to blue, that happens. When you melt the ice, the sea levels rise. When the sea levels rise, the surface area increases. When the surface area increases, the water evaporation increases, because the evaporation rate of water is evaporation rate of water equals theta times the surface area times this thing xs minus x. And it has to do with relative humidities and using a WAAAAY diagram to find that. But theta is equal to 25 plus, I think, like 19 times airspeed velocity. So what that means is when airspeed velocity at the surface increases, which happens from extreme weather, you get more evaporation. But then also theta times A. A is surface area. So when the surface area increases, you get more evaporation. So as water melts and water levels rise, you get, Florida gets covered underwater. Now what used to be land is water, and then now that's going to cause more evaporation. More evaporation puts more water into the air, and water is a greenhouse gas, a really nasty one. I mean, water's great, it creates rains, but it also, when there's too much, creates floods, and it does absorb heat. It's a greenhouse gas. So we don't want to put any more water into the air, the same reason we don't want to put any more CO2 into the air. The problem is that water has these natural feedback loops like this, evaporation, that as temperature goes up, you get more evaporation, both from the theta factor, which is the wind speed, the surface area, and then also the mismatch between the relative humidities and this wet bulb temperature and all these other things that get pulled in. All three of those things increase when temperature increases, and all three of those things cause more evaporation. More evaporation also then will cause further warming, because it's a really powerful greenhouse gas. And as you know, when things warm up, the molecules move around and they move farther apart on average. Something that's hot will actually expand. When things expand and it's the same amount of molecules in the box and it's expanded, there's more space between them. And when there's more space between them, you can fit more stuff in there. One of the things is water. So that's one of the reasons why when air heats up, it can hold more water, because the molecules are just further apart on average. And then, in the mornings and at night, when it cools down and the molecules get closer together, it pushes the water out, and then you get water showing up, condensing out as dew on grass. So the warmer that the air gets, the more water it can hold. The more water it can hold, it's a greenhouse gas. It causes further warming, causes more ice melting, that causes more surface area, which causes more evaporation, which feeds back. It causes more wind events, which feeds back, and it causes more albedo effect, which feeds back. There's multiple feedback loops with temperature, and temperature is going up constantly. It's not, whether you think it's from a natural phenomenon. The fact is that we were in a cooling period before industrialization. We reversed that cooling period and went hockey stick up. So not only did we overcome the natural cycle, we actually overcome it so rapidly that we've prevented many species from being able to adapt to these things, and we've caused so much more ice melting. It's 6 degrees outside in my house right now. Right now is the crucial time of the year where the greenhouse ice sheet should be refreezing and regrowing. The Antarctic ice sheet should be refreezing and, expanding back out. we're starting to see the signs of collapse that are just, it's obvious that it's happening. The science is saying that it's happening. The vast majority of scientists are saying that it's happening. But at the same time, I'm not a carbon's the only thing type of person. I think that, and I'll talk about this in the next one, when we talk about how important it is to have carrying capacity curves and how that's kind of more important than the carbon. It's actually kind of like the root cause of all of this. And carbon is more of a symptom. Like all of this stuff are symptoms that are part of the actual root cause, which we'll talk about. So anyways, carbon does matter, and EVs do sequester carbon, and carbon will absolutely warm the earth. That is just a scientific fact. It's the physical properties of the gas. And yes, we used to have more, and yes, more plants will pull more carbon out, but it's demonstrably true that they're being overwhelmed right now because carbon ppm continues to go up, and the rate that it goes up is continuing to go up. We used to be able to handle more because back when carbon ppm was higher, we had better soil retention. You know, the US right now has got like 3 inches of topsoil. It used to be 25 feet of topsoil, of rich, fertile grasslands and forests. When water fell, it was held there for a really long time and plants could grow. Because they had the water access, they could actually handle more CO2 in the air because they could do the photosynthesis. We've destroyed our soils everywhere. We've paved over the planet. We've put up shingles and roofs and concrete, and then agriculture. We've ripped out the forests and the plants. Like, not only are we physically removing the plants that do the CO2 sequestration, but then we are screwing with the water tables and the water storage of the soils that then allow them, ones that we actually let live still, to do their job. Because of that, they're getting overwhelmed. If they weren't, CO2 would be leveling off. It's not, it's increasing. So, you know, like I try to lead people towards these things, but I'm kind of sick of having to deal with people who have facts explained to them, or explain why the misinformation is the way it is, explain a logical reason why, like the last, I don't know, 7 minutes of this video, and then still cling to the fact that, you know, they want to feed this propaganda that they got from, you know, Murdoch media, you know, from a guy who actually owns coal, oil, and gas exploration companies and owns and controls the media, spreading out their rhetoric and the fake science that was released from the actual coal, oil, and gas companies. Why do you believe them over the actual unbiased scientists when 99% of the unbiased scientists are all agreeing about the same thing? Why? Because people don't trust governments. I understand your position. I totally get it. I'm a small government guy, even though I'm in Canada, and I get when the government says, you shall do this, we will electrify the grid, you will drive an EV, and we will fund projects. And you also see in other areas where there's rampant corruption, where governments give contracts to their friends, and you don't find out later that the contract that was given out is like their wife's cousin, and it's the business that they have. There's so much of this corruption, and politicians have messed this up so bad that people don't trust them, that it's now like politicians are an existential threat to the human race because they've created this environment where people don't trust science anymore. And it's ridiculous. And I'm going to call that crap out from now on. I'm so sick of trying to actually explain people off of the edge and into a rational, logical position. But I've realized that you can't logically explain someone out of a position that they didn't use logic to actually enter into. So if you can't logically enter into a position and you don't use logic and reason to get there, then you won't listen to logic and reason to get you out of it. That's enough of that. Thanks for watching. The next video will help you understand the economics behind why, even if you don't do it for climate reasons and, you know, reducing your own carbon footprint or clean air and water, if you don't do it for any of these reasons, then you should still do it for the just straight up economic reason. Understanding that a lot of people just can't physically get into it because they can't make that initial investment. And if that's you, I'm really apologetic. I'm sorry about that. But if you can save your money and get into it, it will actually become an income stream that will help you save more money in the future. So thanks for watching. Rant over. I can't wait to watch the dumpster fire in the comments on this one. Talk to you guys later. See you on the next one.